A man walks up to the grand lobby of his own hotel, expecting the familiar warmth and respect his name commands. But something feels off. The receptionist's smile is stiff, the manager's gaze cold. Despite the luxury around him, he senses an invisible barrier, a quiet disbelief that he belongs here. Every instinct tells him he should leave, but he doesn't. He's about to face something no amount of wealth or success could shield him from, and what happens next will leave everyone in that hotel stunned, regretting the moment they ever underestimated him. Marcus Reed was not just any traveler checking into a hotel. He was a man who had built an empire from nothing. Born in a modest neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table, Marcus knew the value of persistence. From excelling in school to climbing the corporate ladder, he had faced prejudice at every stage of his journey. And yet, he never let it break him. Instead, he turned every rejection into fuel, every stereotype into a challenge to overcome. Years later, Marcus owned more than a dozen luxury hotels spread across the country, each one a symbol of his determination and vision. They weren't just buildings. They were monuments to a life spent defying expectations. His latest pride and joy was a towering glass-front property downtown, an architectural gem glowing with elegance and prestige. For Marcus, it was more than a business venture. It was personal. He had poured his heart into every detail, from the lobby's marble floors to the rooftop restaurant that overlooked the city skyline. On this particular evening, Marcus arrived at his flagship hotel unannounced. He liked doing that sometimes, walking in quietly, observing how guests were treated, and making sure his staff lived up to the high standards he demanded. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit that day, just a simple button-up shirt and slacks. To everyone else, he looked like just another guest. But what Marcus didn't realize was that this unplanned visit would soon reveal something far deeper than poor customer service. It would expose a truth he had known all his life, that no matter how successful he became, there were still those who would look at him and only see the color of his skin. As Marcus approached the front desk, the receptionist's posture stiffened. There was a brief hesitation, a subtle shift in the way she glanced at him, as if uncertain about whether to acknowledge him. Marcus, ever observant, noticed it immediately. He smiled politely, handing over his identification, expecting the usual recognition. But instead of the nod or welcoming words he deserved, the clerk's eyes flickered with doubt, and she murmured something about unavailable rooms. It wasn't just a technical error. Marcus could feel the tension building around him. The manager emerged from behind the desk, perfectly groomed and impeccably polite, yet with a faint sneer barely disguised behind a practiced smile. He checked the system once, twice, and then, almost reluctantly, told Marcus that there were no rooms available for him that night. The words hung in the air like a heavy curtain, suffocating in their casual cruelty. Marcus knew he was being denied, not because of his schedule or the hotel's capacity, but because of the color of his skin. A knot of anger tightened in his chest, but he didn't let it show. Years of experience had taught him that reactions in the heat of emotion rarely changed minds. They only gave people satisfaction. Instead, he stayed calm, projecting the quiet confidence that had carried him through boardrooms and negotiations where others had doubted him. Slowly, deliberately, he walked through the lobby, every step measured, every movement radiating authority. The tension in the room became almost tangible. Guests paused mid-conversation, staff straightened instinctively, and the manager's composure faltered slightly, a small crack in the facade that revealed his discomfort. At that moment, Marcus decided it was time to assert himself. He would make them understand that success, dignity, and respect could not be undermined by prejudice. Every detail mattered. The tone of his voice, the placement of his hands, the calm firmness in his eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand anything in a way that could be dismissed. Yet his presence alone was a statement, a silent reminder that wealth and status did not erase the sting of discrimination, but they could be used as instruments of justice. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the hotel lobby transformed from polite detachment to charged anticipation. Marcus's calm strength became a magnet, drawing attention and tension simultaneously. It was no longer just a denied reservation. It had become a moment of reckoning. The staff and guests alike were waiting, knowingly or unknowingly, for him to act. To prove that no one, not even those who controlled access to his own property, could undermine the respect he had earned through decades of hard work, perseverance, and resilience. Marcus finally reached the center of the lobby, where the manager had positioned himself as if attempting to assert dominance. Every eye was on him now, some curious, some uneasy. Marcus didn't speak immediately. He let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment settle over everyone present. The manager shifted uncomfortably, realizing that this wasn't going to be an ordinary confrontation. Then Marcus acted, but not with anger. He pulled out his phone, tapping a few buttons with deliberate precision. Within moments, the hotel's entire reservation system reflected his ownership. Every room, suite, and penthouse now clearly marked as under his management. He had the authority, the documentation, and the proof of his identity ready, and yet he delivered it with a calm, measured demeanor that made it impossible to argue against. The manager's face drained of color as he glanced at the screen, then back at Marcus. There was a brief, almost imperceptible moment of recognition. He understood that he had underestimated the man in front of him, not just as a guest, but as the person who owned the very building they stood in. Staff whispered among themselves, some openly apologetic, others bewildered at the reversal. Guests exchanged glances, realizing they had been spectators to a quiet but profound lesson in power, dignity, and accountability. Marcus didn't humiliate anyone. He didn't yell or threaten. His authority was asserted not through force, but through undeniable truth and presence. The injustice of the moment, the discrimination he had faced, was mirrored by the realization that respect and competence could not be dismissed by prejudice. Every movement, every glance, every calculated gesture reinforced his dominance in the situation while maintaining an air of composure that demanded acknowledgement. As he walked past the stunned manager and toward the elevator that led to his suite, the tension in the room broke. Conversations resumed, but with a new tone, a subtle respect that had been absent before. Marcus had not just reclaimed a room. He had reclaimed a space where prejudice could not dictate behavior. The climax wasn't about anger. It was about power, principle, and the quiet, undeniable impact of a man who refused to be diminished by ignorance or bias. Later that night, Marcus stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite, gazing out at the city lights that shimmered against the skyline. The same building that had tried to deny him a simple room was now beneath him, literally and figuratively. It wasn't about luxury or status anymore. It was about the principle. But Marcus also knew something else. His response had changed, more than just his own night. By handling the situation with dignity and strength, he had forced everyone in that lobby to confront their own assumptions. Guests who had silently judged were now left questioning their bias. Staff members who had followed orders without thinking were faced with the reality that prejudice carries consequences. And the manager, who had underestimated him so casually, now had to carry the weight of his actions in front of an entire room of witnesses. For Marcus, it wasn't the first time he had been reminded of this truth, and it wouldn't be the last. But each time it happened, he turned it into a lesson, not just for himself, but for others. He knew that as long as prejudice existed, there would be countless others without his wealth, status, or influence who would face similar moments with far fewer tools to fight back. And that thought stayed with him. As the night wore on, Marcus resolved that his success would never be just about him. It would be about opening doors for others, creating spaces where dignity wasn't questioned, and ensuring that one day, one would have to prove they belonged in a place they already owned. Because the truth was clear, racism doesn't disappear when you succeed. It disappears when society decides it no longer has a place. And the question remained, how many of us are truly willing to be part of that change? If you've experienced or witnessed the same, share your story in the comments. I might even make a video about it to raise awareness and justice. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so together we can spread the message further.